Mouth is where we're going to go ahead and begin our descension into the digestive system, beginning with just a couple of the things. First is to talk about what encases or what forms the mouth cavity. We're going to start off at the very superior portion of it, starting off with this hard palate, the hard palate being made of the maxilla as well as the palatine bone being most posterior portion of the hard palate. Once you get past that bone, it becomes soft and squishy because of muscle. That portion is called the soft palate. And if you were to follow that soft palate back more posteriorly, you would find the uvula, which is making, if you remember back to our chapter on the respiratory system, when you swallow something, that uvula can swing up and close off that nasopharynx, so that way food doesn't sneak up into there. If we go more laterally, you'll see the cheeks, which is a way of keeping foods on those teeth. Most omnivores and herbivores have their cheeks covering over their molars, their grinding teeth, because they have to keep that food in its place. Most carnivores, you'll notice, have their mouths more wide open. The cheeks are way further back to display their teeth and be able to grab a little bit better. For us, these cheeks, because we are omnivores, we are the ones that eat both plant and animal, we do need to be able to grind up those stronger fibers. And we need to be able to keep it on those teeth, so those cheeks are there to help keep it in place. On the other side of these teeth, you'll find the tongue. The tongue is there as an accessory structure. As you remember back in our last discussion, it is there for talking. It's there for swirling food around, mixing it a little bit better, or smashing it even. And as well as keeping your food more onto those teeth and helping it mix there. Now, since I've mentioned teeth several times, I've mentioned molars, we should probably point out these different types of teeth really quick and their roles. So the very frontal, the most anterior teeth that you have are called incisors. You have 4 on the bottom, 4 on the top. This is usually used for cutting and slicing off and things like that. And just lateral to your most lateral incisors is your canines. This is the one that helps rip food. It grabs on much more easily and helps tear and rip. Behind those, we get more of the vegetarian, the more herbivore-like teeth going on, the premolars and the molars, which are mostly used for grinding. Since we were talking about teeth, let's go ahead and take a cross section of a tooth. Starting off with the portion that's exposed to the food the most often and frequently is the enamel. It's a really strong calcium salt. It protects the tooth from being worn down very easily because of its strong structure. Yes, it's strong mechanically. It can take a beating, but chemically it's kind of weak. If you're drinking consistently Coca-Cola, or I shouldn't point out one thing, any type of acidic drink, juices, things like that, or you're not brushing your teeth and you're letting bacteria grow in your mouth in high abundance, these things are acidic and calcium sometimes likes to be a buffer. So these teeth can be worn down. This enamel can be worn down, which is not a good thing. Brush your teeth often, floss often. You don't want that bacteria that produces an acid to help eat, which acid will eventually help eat away that tooth. Below that enamel, you're going to find a dentin, which isn't as heavily concentrated in calcium, but it's still there, and it makes up the majority of your tooth. That dentin is that structural connective support that also forms a cavity that you can call the pulp cavity. And that pulp cavity is going to go ahead and actually go, as it descends deeper, you'll see these canals form. This is actually called a root canal. So when you're getting a root canal because you decided to forego flossing and brushing your teeth and drinking all those acidic things and letting the bacteria grow, that bacteria can invade and get into that root canal. And you can see that you don't really want bacteria like that hanging out in your blood supply. In fact, there is a really interesting thing that has come to light recently, back in the late 2000s, in which there is a very strong correlation between teeth and heart health. If you are not taking care of your teeth, you're not taking care of brushing and flossing and all that stuff, bacteria that, and you're getting cavities and root canals all the time, you're more likely to get a you're more likely to have cardiovascular issues and bacterial issues and all that stuff. Your heart health will decline. So brush your teeth. So both obviously we aren't born with teeth, thankfully. Could you imagine the kid biting the umbilical cord or biting mommy from the inside? That would be a very uncomfortable experience. Usually these teeth don't start forming until 8 to 12 months, and these are the incisors that start forming. Later on, the canines, and then the bigger, bulkier ones will come out later. To the side of that, you're going to see a normal adult teeth. You'll see that we have a couple of extra ones. They do, or at least it looks like we got some extra premolars. If we were to cut away the molars, we kind of have a nice similar setup to that of the children. But we got the first, secondary, and third molar. Most of us do not keep that third molar. It is our wisdom tooth. Some of us have 4, some of us have an extra 1 or 2 that come through. Often these teeth do not grow in appropriately. They're there usually to help replace, as we get back in the old days when we didn't really have tooth care and all that stuff, we'd lose 1 or tooth or 2 with grinding and all that stuff. So these third molar teeth would grow in their place. But now that we've gotten better at tooth hygiene, these things sort of just impact in there, and it's just not a good, happy, pretty situation. Continuing on back to our mouth, there's just a couple more things we need to talk about. So we have the teeth. They are well set into the maxilla, or they are set, if they're lower jaw, they're set really well into the mandible. If you check underneath this tongue, you're going to see a couple of holes here. This is a nice, wonderful segue into our next topic about the mouth, the salivary glands. The salivary glands are the ones that I bet could be activated if you just think of your most wonderful, delightsome favorite dessert in the whole wide world. Mine is like a chocolate chip cookie where it just falls apart, fresh out of the oven, nice and gooey. Chocolate stretches out as you break the cookie in half. So delicious. You got 3 pairs. You got the parotid, the submandibular, as well as sublingual. The last 2 pretty much sum up their location, which is really nice. We're going to go ahead and take a look-see. We got the sublingual right there underneath the tongue, and we got the submandibular underneath that there mandible. The parotid's not so clear and evident in its name as to where it is, but well, it's off to the side, just below that earlobe. It's hanging out with the masseter muscle. You'll see that the outlet for that parotid gland is somewhere close to those molars, that secondary molar. The sublingual gland has several ducts spanning in underneath the tongue, with the submandibular having 1 duct process coming up pretty close to that base of that tongue. All of which produce different secretions, but all of which produce or have some type of role in creating a chemical digestion. So for instance, there are 2 enzymes. If you're remembering back to the last discussion, enzymes are proteins. They are, if they end with an ACE, if you are presented with a name of some type of molecular thing and it ends with an ACE, you can bet your bottom dollar it's a protein that digests things, an enzyme. Most of the time, if it's an acid, it tells you exactly what it digests or does with the beginning of its name. So for instance, lipase, we have a lingual lipase being produced here in the mouth. That lingual lipase will break down, well, lipase, Lipase. It breaks down lipids. So lipases break down lipids. We also have another enzyme called an amylase being produced here. Amy means sweet. Amy, if you have a friend named Amy, she's most likely sweet, right? Well, hopefully so, because this would make this whole comparison much easier. Well, amylase breaks down, well, sugars. If you were to eat a cracker of some sort that doesn't have much cellulose to it, and you mulch it around and mull it around inside your mouth for more than 30, 40 seconds, you might start tasting something sweet. Because what's happening is that that complex carbohydrate is being broken down as you mull it around with and mix it around with amylase that's found in your saliva. So just a brief reminder about the chemical and mechanical digestion comparisons to help you remember. When you are chewing, by the way, the fancy way for saying chewing that you need to know, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this and I'm going to spell this out for you. Mastication. Mastication is the fancy way of saying chewing, and yes, you do need to know what that is. That you do need to know. If I were to say, "Hey, what are you masticating there?" You're going to be referring to your dog, or if you're talking to your dog, "What are you masticating there?" And you're actually just asking what is it's chewing. Chemical digestion will involve salivary glands and their secretions. So again, salivary amylase, which breaks down the polysaccharides into disaccharides, so it gives it that sweeter taste. And then the lingual lipase, which digests those fats. With that, that is the end of this video. Thank you very much, and remember, you got this.